Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Angel Island and how being Asian American has affected people's social opportunities. So, I'm going to read this passage from the 14th Amendment, which was passed in 1866 for our do now. It says, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." So just think about that for a second and think about how it compares to this question. In 1882, the United States passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, barring Chinese immigrants from coming to America. Does this fit with the spirit of the amendment above? Why or why not? How do you think the people of the United States could support both of these laws? So just pause the video for a second and think about that. Okay, so pretty obviously, the Chinese Exclusion Act doesn't fit with the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which I read above. So the Chinese Exclusion Act pretty obviously discriminates against Chinese people, while the Equal Protection Clause offers the same protection to everybody, no matter who they are, um, and no matter what groups they might be part of or what minorities they might be part of. So, how the people of the United States could probably support both of these laws because, well, for one, the 14th Amendment applies to citizens, and Chinese people, if they couldn't come to America, they wouldn't be citizens. So they could rationalize it by saying, well, they aren't citizens yet, so they don't deserve the same rights. So they're not as good as American people. So it's fair to discriminate against Chinese people, while it's not fair to discriminate us against us as U.S. citizens. So just thinking about Chinese immigration and the Chinese Exclusion Act, what was Angel Island? Angel Island was essentially the West Coast equivalent of Ellis Island, built specifically to house Chinese immigrants after the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act. Unlike Ellis Island, however, no one was supposed to leave Angel Island. No one was supposed to enter the US from Angel Island. It was built as an inescapable fortress meant to isolate immigrants who could be in prison for months or years as they waited for the case to be processed. It was open from January of 1910 until it burned down in August 1940. And the Chinese Exclusion Act wasn't repealed until 3 years after it burned down in 1943. So, just real quick, this image above is of immigrants arriving at Angel Island from the ferry. So, at Angel Island, immigrants would arrive and be taken to the administrative building. They'd be forced to undergo a humiliating medical exam and could be deported if they failed. If they passed, they were assigned detention cells to wait for months for their trial. And interrogators were grueling with questions about minute details to prevent illegal immigration. So they might ask, because the Chinese Exclusion Act stated that any immigrant could come in if they had family in the US. Many immigrants pretended they had family in the US. So interrogators would ask, like, how many steps are there up the porch of your cousin? Or what is the occupation of your cousin's next door neighbor? Something like that. If they could prove that they were either an American citizen or the relative of an American citizen, they were allowed to enter the US. So on the left here, there's a photograph of some of the medical exams. There's a doctor checking their eyes. So Angel Island is most famous for its poems. While detained at Angel Island, many people wrote of their experiences through poems they carved on the wall. Most of the poets were men between 14 and 18 with very little education. But the poems are still beautiful and their themes are very powerful. So they have themes of disappointment, anger, depression, and homesickness. And many of the poems are in the style of classical Chinese poetry. So on the left here is an example of one of the poems. So, just something to think about for the exit slip here. During World War II, the United States government forced about 120,000 Japanese Americans into internment camps on the West Coast for no reason but their race. And one of the internment camps you can see here on the right. How is that similar to Angel Island? How might have Angel Island made Americans used to American internment of Asians? So just pause the video for a second and think about that. Okay, so the internment camps were similar to Angel Island in that um, Japanese Americans were viewed as a security threat, even though they're American citizens, and some of them had never been to Japan. Some of them were second or third generation American citizens and had never been a Japanese citizen in the first place. But they were still interned because they were seen as a threat to America or invaluable in some or unvaluable in some way. And this is similar to Angel Island because Chinese Americans were seen as a threat to American jobs, and they were seen as um, people who would bring problems to America rather than the valuable assets and people they really were. So Angel Island made Americans used to American internment of Asians because it got them used to the idea of imprisoning people based off of their race. Um, and it's not just Angel Island and Japanese internment. I mean, this has happened with Native Americans. It's happened with Black people being jailed for crimes they didn't commit. Um, it's happened with Native American reservations being pushed onto land um, with their original land stolen away. It's happened with anyone the US government sees as a threat. It's happened with gay people. It's happened throughout history with any group that wants to silence another group. So when the government starts to imprison people, that's when you really have to watch out because, you know, um, if the government finds it easy to strip one group of their rights, they'll find it easy to strip another group of their rights. So, once again, thank you for joining me. As usual, I'll link the primary source document in the description. And actually, in today's primary source document, you can read some of the beautiful poems written on the walls of Angel Island. So, I really suggest you check it out. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you again later.